And we're here to please. I'm wearing this little Audrey Jr. on my head as a loan from a friend of mine, because I thought, what could be more appropriate than this little hair bob, and also it helps me remember. You know, I tap it. Oh yes, I'm in Atlanta or Alpharetta. How many people here are from Atlanta? Yay! Nice to meet you. And
can I start asking questions? Sure.
oh, this is Matt.
Oh, they don't care about me, but I just want to. We'll just keep the ball rolling here. So some of them are from here, and you're from LA, and unlike a lot of actors, you were actually born in Los Angeles, correct?
I am an agent.
Wow.
In the ward of General Hospital, downtown LA. And my mother was an orphan in the Depression. And then before I was born, my poor young father died. So she was a widow orphan of the Depression, which made her a challenging mom. And I had to become old and 19 like her to figure out what she was going through. So I did spend a lot of my life alone. I listened to the radio, and my mother was out working or being a 19-year-old. And so the radio and I had a wonderful time together. I feel sorry for a lot of people today because they don't listen to dramas on the radio. And so their imagination might not be as wild as a lot of ours were allowed to be. We could picture our own Grand Central Station or Shadow in Mysteries, but that has nothing to do with why you're here today. I thought I'd just give you a peek on how I started enjoying this world. And I know Matt, because you must wonder, how did you find him? Because he is a very dear friend and works with Larry Storch, who is a very good friend of mine that I love intensely. And Matt is so great with Larry, and he asked to come and help me. Because
I'll be with Larry tomorrow in New York City if any of you make your way up there.
Does anybody not know Larry Storch?
Oh, everyone here knows.
He gone from
Storch.
F, right? And then
Of course.
Yeah.
Ghostbuster.
We got to be good friends while he was doing F-Troop. You know, I don't hear very well.
Oh, sorry.
So if someone else is talking,
I'll
just start talking and they'll think, what a rude woman. But I'm sorry, Matt.
No. Go on. Well, you played Larry's girlfriend on F-Troop.
I was his girlfriend on F-Troop.
Oh.
And as he says often, which Matt just told me wasn't true, that I was the only girlfriend he ever had in his career. And so I felt very special about that until this morning.
Well, listen, Larry did an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and he had a girlfriend on that show. But the good thing is he killed her, and he didn't kill you on F-Troop, so
Well,
I mean, that's something to smile about.
happy days are here again. Anyway.
Well, so growing up in LA, did you were talking about radio. What about movies and things like that? Were you big on going to the movies? And
I was a youngster during World War II and was a member of the Junior Army in Los Angeles. And we had a little card, and we collected newspaper and bacon grease and things like that. It was our job during the war, old tin pans and things like that. And we got to go to free movies downtown Los Angeles, and take the streetcar and go to these great movie houses, which are now malls or something like that. But we could see the Sonia Henney movies and the musicals. And being sort of an alone person in my youth, I used to fantasize that I was Jeanette MacDonald or Catherine Grayson, who was the young up-and-comer, but I loved Jeanette. And of course, Nelson was in my dreams that I didn't even know what I was dreaming about, but I loved him. And so I would be walking down the streets or walking through the tunnel, going to see my grandparents, singing with great abandon, the Jeanette MacDonald song, and sing, 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 and just having a great time being them. And so I don't think in my real life I ever thought I'd really have a chance to even closely do what they did, but accidentally, everything that happens, almost I think to everybody, happens because if this didn't happen, you never would have done this. And so there's all these bizarre turning points that lead you to Alpha River. And so that's the very beginning.
Well, you also told me yesterday in the car when we were going to get lunch, you remember getting your very first laugh ever.
Oh, yes. And I didn't know there was anything funny about me. But I was going with girlfriends to an acting class in junior high school. They were members, and I was visitor because my mother couldn't pay for anything. And so while I'm watching, this lady who was the teacher turns out to be a historically iconic woman who invented improvisation. And her name was Viola Spolin, and she was working on a book called Theater Games. And then she took it to Chicago and started Second City and the whole improvisational world. But she was working out the games with the kids there. And she was a very largely expressive, smart woman. And she was kind enough to ask me if I wanted to participate in something. So I did, and something I did struck her funny. And she went, ha, ha, ha. In case I didn't know that she was really laughing. But she wanted me to know that she was amused and that I was funny to her. And that, like, it just lifts your soul to think you could make somebody laugh. And I wasn't consciously doing that, but I'm kind of an unconscious funny person. If that but that is carried out through most of my career was comedy. And it wasn't forced comedy, it was just telling the truth, and you get a good script and a good character, and if you put all your truth into it, then it's funny. And I was so fortunate to get into comedies like Dick Van Dyke, and all my characters were not people trying to be funny. They were people in their situation that they were just funny. And it's really fun to make somebody laugh who is famous, because when the way they did the Dick Van Dyke show is that everybody sat and read the script, and then the producers, which was Danny Thomas and Sheldon Leonard, and Sheldon Leonard was a character actor prior to becoming a major producer, and he always played hoodlums and some guy with a gun threatening people. But in real life, he was like someone who was cashmere, like you just wanted to go, hello, Sheldon, rub his sleeve. He was just elegant, and Danny was charming and kind. And so after they go, and during that one day, they put the show on its feet, which means kind of where you're standing, where you're doing. And at the end of the day, you run through it. You've got to remember as much as possible. Of course, you have a script, but you do the show. And there was this one show in particular that I got Danny and Sheldon hysterical. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm making them laugh. I'm making them laugh. And how important that was. Really significant that you could amuse these people who were nice enough to hire you to have this great fun and also to survive, which helps a lot. I think my funniest laugh I got from them was when I played a stripper who was called Alberta Schweitzer. She wore like a little leotard and the necessary knit stockings and high-heeled shoes and a pit helmet with a great curtain hanging from it behind. And so I really wanted to, in the show, Alberta Schweitzer wanted to impress Dick Van Dyke's character because she wanted to be an actress and he was producing, you know, she didn't care what show it was, he was just a producer. And so she was performing to Shakespeare, the quality of mercy is not straight, bump, bump. And of course, doing it seriously, it turned out to be pretty funny. And just stuff like that was so much fun to do. And I think of the person who did that, my younger self, as that girl. I mean, not Marlo Thomas. I did that show too. Marlo was so fun. But as I'm looking back at my senior self, thinking about those days, and I think, that girl, I'm very fond of her. and I'm proud that she prevailed, because real life was challenging. And at some point, I unexpectedly became a divorced person from my darling husband. And we had adopted 2 children, and I was always protective of. I met my husband, Ken Berry, who we were in a musical review in 1958, and we became engaged. And we were engaged for 3 years before we were married, because he didn't have any money, and he was from Illinois. And what charmed me so about him was that when he finally did have a conversation, it was about how much he loved his family, and I had only heard people say, "Oh, I hate my family," you know, and you think, gosh, somebody loves their family. And so, you know, we had one of those backstage romances which are so nauseating to everybody else in the cast. Oh no, you know.
And that was the Billy Barnes review.
It was
right?
called the Billy Barnes Review, and we did several editions, and it was really quite successful. We went to New York, and so it was a very romantic, you know, I was a good girl, you know, those were the days, and he was he was so great on stage. I mean, I really just went kerplunk the first time I saw him dance. It was a rehearsal where everyone in the review got together and did their thing that the other people haven't seen yet. And he did his dance number, and I just went, whoa, because he carried himself so beautifully and had, you know, an effortless way of dancing. I never dawned on me until like when I would see him on YouTube, and I think, what strength that took. I mean, he jumps but he never looked like he was going. He just flew, and he was indeed a darling boy, and his family was not crazy about me, and they didn't know me, but it was like there was a religious thing that I thought, no, and so. In spite of it all, because that embarrassed him, we did get married, and his family came around, especially when they found out he really, at one point, got another house and was living with somebody else. And I thought that was so sad when I found out. So he said it's just what guys did, and he didn't want to get a divorce. And I thought, that's so hypocritical, pretending you're married, you know. And so regretfully, I left that, and then I knew he was always worried about working, so that's when you're crazy, you know, when you're separating. And so the one thing I knew is I never would take money from him, because he was scared all the time about not working. And he wasn't scared about getting another house. Now that I think about it. No, I mean, but I never stopped being friends with him, and I thought that was more valuable than money, because our children were going to have graduations and, you know, hopefully occasions that we could be together and not be diversions by, oh, they're both in the room and that stuff. So that never happened. And as his girlfriend for a while used to call me her ex-wife, because I was still very present in the world. I wouldn't go away. That's maybe a secret punishment. But I was with him when he died, and spent lovely times with him, talking, helping bringing him meals, and then being in the hospital with him. And we were able to say, I mean, I was always very vocal, and he came to all my parties. He approved of my remarriage. My current husband actually called him, and I didn't even know he was going to propose. But it was a big 70th birthday party. Imagine being proposed to at 70. I thought it was so funny. And my girlfriends were tickled. I mean, even having a boyfriend is so funny. And my current husband, someone I went to college with, and then 50 years later, you know, you have a new life and start over. So, and now we've been married almost 20 years, so, yeah, not quite, but I'll be 86, so you don't have to do the math.
So going back a little bit.
How far?
Well, I did some research last night, believe it or not.
That's about
And
time.
yeah, I'm telling you. So one of your first movies, am I correct, was a small role in King Creole with Elvis Presley?
Oh, I did. I did it, a little role. He did a thing at a dime store where he came in with his gang and he was playing some song, and I was someone in a teddy bear selling booth. And you know, in the dime stores out there, big cul-de-sacs, and there's a space where you get out. So it's very crowded set, and Elvis is walking around, and then he comes to the teddy bears, and I'm going. And so that was our moment together. And when they were calling for the set to disperse, for everybody to leave, the shot was over, I turned around to leave the cul-de-sac, and Elvis is standing there at the exit, so I couldn't get out. And he had his guitar, and he's starting to strum, and then he started to sing. And being the mature person that I am, I thought there was something funny about that. So I'm just singing at you. But also, I was trying to gather a sentence in my head. What do you tell Elvis Presley who's singing at you, and be cool about it, you know? So I'm listening, and then he finished, and so I had my sentence, and I said, you know, you're very good with a ballad. Have you thought about recording? Because he had only done He said he was talking to the who was that man? The Colonel.
Colonel.
And he said they were talking about Gospels and something quiet. And I said, I think that'd be really, really good for you. He said, really, thank you. And then he said, you know, I'm having a party tonight. You know, just a gathering at my house, and I'd love to have you come if you'd like. And my friends, and he pointed off stage this little group of guys, and I thought very quickly, and I said to him, oh, that's so kind of you, but I have another plan. What was I thinking?
I mean, that's bizarre, because you're the second person. Larry told me a similar story. He was in Las Vegas, and Elvis came to see him, or he took his nephew to see Elvis, and Elvis invited Larry up to the penthouse, and Larry said no, and Larry's nephew hated him forever. So you and Larry are the two people that said no to hanging out with Elvis.
It is not the same thing.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't think
Girl
Elvis
to a
is...
party or not, there is a different reaction. I remember thinking, it's so not the same.
No, I didn't think of it like that, sorry.
Like I might say tarnish my reputation, which no one cared about anyway. I was just a very salesperson. But anyway, so that's my Elvis moment.
You may have ended up with a pink
And
Cadillac.
Larry's moment.
And Larry's, yes, of not hanging out with Elvis Presley. So one of the roles that you're very well known for, especially down south, is on the Andy Griffith Show, playing Ernest T. Beth's girlfriend.
Her name was Ramona, but he called her my sweet Romina. And a lot of people think I was a regular on the Andy Griffith Show because they rerun it so much that it looks like you're there all the time. But I only did that one show. But yet in Mayberry, in the Mayberry world, she's a very important person. First of all, she's one of the only people still living. But you know, along with Maggie Peterson, who is Charlene Darling, and then
Betty.
Darling Betty Mann, who is
I think she just turned 93.
Opie.
well, probably.
Oh, and Opie. Yeah,
Opie's
right.
still
Yeah,
around.
we forget about the actual main cast member who's still around.
She lives there now, but she's a funny girl, and the people love that character because she was just such a wallflower. And then when Ernest T. asked her to dance, she was just absolutely passionately carried away. And when he did something called hefting, which was like our sexual involvement. He like picked her up and made her up in the sky for a second and brought her down, and she went, oh, you know, like that. It was really a marvelous moment. And in the end, when he was getting kind of kicked out for knocking somebody out or something in a jealous rage, she followed him, and we got to jump over a tree stump, and you know, what do they call that? That grass hopping or some kind of...
Oh, leapfrog?
Leapfrogging, I was close. In fact, an embarrassing thing happened because I had a little pink gingham dress on, and the first time I did that leapfrog over the tree stump, the back of my skirt caught the stump, so instead of flying onto my feet, I fell on my face.
Oh,
and they're filming it, and you know how you want to pretend something really didn't happen. Oh, I'm fine, you know, and meanwhile everyone is brushing off my outfit because I had to do it again. And luckily I didn't, you know, look bleeding from the face or anything. So the one in the episode is the second leapfrog, which is done with caution and a great deal of good fortune. But that is memorable, people. And you got to talking about abandon, you know, at the end we were leaping on trees and running down the street, jumping. It's really fun to get to do crazy stuff like that. And I don't know if any of you are Howard Morse fans, but he was, first of all, one of the great actor comics historically. on television for the shows, and I was a great fan of his. And really, one of the most interesting things about that delicious little episode was the first day I went to work. I didn't ever work with them before, and they didn't really know me. And so when we read the script, they kept laughing hysterically. And Andy was saying, "Where have you been? What, you are so great. This is so fun." And I was like, so high. And then one of the assistants came in, and he had a radio, and he said, "John Kennedy was just shot." And so from up here, it was absolutely like this room is right now, stunning. And so they decided to break for a lunchtime, and then we'd get together and decide how to proceed. And what they did is they just kind of blocked out the show, just a little walking of it. And everybody's, except Aunt B, who didn't care. But
Republican maybe.
It's on camera now.
It made me so sad. I was really sad that anybody fluffed it off. Oh, well, they're rich, oh, whatever. And so, but Howard and I were just decimated and, sobbing at the water cooler. But then we all were excused home for the very long and memorable weekend, and then we came back and we had to go to work, and you just had to focus and do your job. And hello. Sorry. That's Howie approving.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't say anything bad about you, Howard. No, he really did become like Ernest T. Bass in years following. Howard was. And he asked me to marry him once. We went out to lunch, and he brought me a gift. It was a Maltese Falcon. Oh, great. I later found out he probably had a case of them that he did. But, an imposing gift. And after our lunch, he asked me to marry him, and I'm thinking, Howie, we just had lunch, And so I didn't let him pursue that, and he was mad at me a couple of years. But I always pretended I didn't know that.
Oh, of course.
Hi,
Well, every year they do something in.
And Mount Airy, they're there now.
Yeah. Oh, right. That's right. Yeah,
Having
that's
the Mayberry
right.
Days.
Yeah. So if you ever, what is it? The third weekend in September, I think it is.
I think so. But
Yeah, they have something
it was,
in Mount Airy.
always great fun, and it's interesting. The Mayberry fans, the horror show fans, they're all the same people. I mean, except they dress different.
Well, so let's talk about horror movies, since it is a horror show.
I mean, once they come up to you, it's "Hello, Miss Joseph." It's like the person next door. But the first horror show I went to, I was very surprised because people were having bloody scars dripping down their face, and, wearing fierce outfits. And I mean, this is a very tame horror show, or else people haven't done it yet. But it's, I saw a man in a crowd at my first horror show, and he was very tall and menacing looking. But he had on orange pants with little, instead of polka dots, it was like little Frankensteins all over his pants. And so I suddenly saw him take a bead on my place, and he was coming over, and just like Elvis Presley, I'm thinking, what do I say? Get a sentence ready. And he came over, and I said, well, those are such interesting pants. And he leaned over to me confidentially and said, there's not that many places that you could wear these. And I commiserate, oh, I'm sure, no. And it was such a fact.
So speaking of horror films, A Little Shop of Horrors, how did you get cast in that? Did you know, you knew Dick Miller, I think, right?
Well, no.
And Rod?
No, not then. No, I was in New York. I just finished doing the Billy Barnes Review in New York and engaged to Ken. You know, our apartment buildings were close together, but good girl. I got this call to go back to LA and do the lead in this Roger Corman movie. No interview, no anything. But I think he saw the quality that I had, like that he had seen probably in the Billy Barnes Review, and he wanted somebody with innocence to play Audrey, to have in this dark situation an innocent girl, and you know he got the right person. I do have a basic innocence, especially when I was innocent. But, I just got that call, and from the time I flew there, because it was a detective movie, they totally rewrote the movie and gave us a new script, and it was just a few days before shooting. And Jonathan Hayes, who's the star of Little Shop, and I got together and helped each other memorize the whole script, because we had to do the movie in 2 days. Wow.
Yeah.
So that was an infamous 2-day movie. And like you'd change in a carpenter's booth, you didn't have time to rent to a dressing room. And there's a reason why we had to finish by midnight of 1959. I found out much later, was that in January of 1960, the Screen Actors Guild contract first offered residuals. That means when you're shown in a film, then you get a little payment. So Roger didn't want to pay residuals, which was very smart because this movie ran a zillion times on television. But it missed the residual zone, but it reached its own zone. It became much more than we ever dreamed while we were making it. And we didn't know at the time, and no one knew that it would put its tendrils into the soul of so many people that they would, you know, that they would even write a musical about it. I didn't know about it until it was like open. Someone said, "Did you know there's a musical?" And we said, "No." And Roger was there, but he didn't tell them about us. He wanted it to be just about him, which was pretty smart.
And I think some of the sets that were for Little Shop of Horrors were the sets that they used on Bucket of Blood, right? They were leftover sets from
anything they had. Shooting Little Shop, it was very fast. And I missed Jack Nicholson's whole scene because I was changing my dress. You know, it didn't take all that long. But you know, funny thing, because I was new to movies and I respected just the thought. I mean, my main thought was always, I'm in a movie, not, you know, anything else. And when I first went for my first day to the makeup man, I remember thinking, everybody here is a professional and they know this art, and it's different than stage, I'm sure, whatever it is, just respect the professional. And fortunately, while they're doing your makeup, you're sitting in front of a mirror, and I watched this guy, and suddenly my eyebrows were getting larger than usual. And so I just said to him, have you made up a lot of women? And he went, oh no, I just do monsters. Oh, that's nice. And so then I told myself, this is when it's okay to go into the ladies' room and go, brush it down a little. So I thought that was always funny. my monster makeup man. And oh gosh, just doing the whole thing was so ridiculous. But Roger was so ahead of his time. He shot it with 4 cameras. And of course, in film now I've learned that there's great caution that you shouldn't have the boom mic, a big microphone on a pole that catches your dialogue, but the shadow can't be in the picture. And it's not in most pictures, but it is in Little Shop because they didn't have time to shoot over again, you know. If you're doing some scenes and then you're going like this because you see this shadow, or you just take the shadow and go. But it's, I must say, Rogers himself is such a gentleman. He reminds me of like a country squire from England. His figure is very elegant, considering his output, which is inelegant. But I saw him last December. So kind. There was a wonderful birthday party for Dick Miller, who, of course, I love with a passion. He ate the flowers in Little Shop. And the only reason that he didn't do the lead was because he had just done Bucket of Blood, and he thought it would be, you know, he'd get typecast as sort of this nebbish little guy. And so Jonathan got to move up and did a very good Seymour. And he and Dick were very close friends before and until the very end. And anyway, Dick had a 90th birthday party, and his wife had it segmented into decades. So the show part of it was that they would call one person from each decade, and they would go up and they would light one of 9 candles and tell a little bit about their relationship with Dick in that decade. And then so Roger got to do the decade of the Little Shop, Joe Dante of Gremlins, where Dick played my husband, the snowplow operator. You know, he came and did that, and then Jonathan got to do the decade of, you know, it was just very touching. And Dick was there. It was like you couldn't have a better memorial than what his 90th birthday was. And he did pass about a month after that.
It was weeks, just weeks.
And so there was this glorious memory. And even at that party, he was swing dancing.
Oh yeah, there's pictures on Facebook. I think he put some up there.
He always went swing dancing with his wife. He was that kind of guy.
Good for your
And
cardiovascular
big family man. He loved his brothers. He, you know, had a daughter and a fabulous granddaughter, and so he was a happy guy. And his wife is trying to carry on his memory, and so Dick, what a fun person he was.
He was here 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I thought of something funny. I'll just have to reach for that memory again.
So,
In Gremlins.
Gremlins, yes.
Yes.
Tell us about Gremlins. That was
I thought it was
next on the
funny
list.
that we were killed in the first movie. We were run over by a snowplow going, oh no, ah, and then you're dead. The next movie,
You're back.
it opens in New York City, and over the credits, a little music, and in the distance as they get closer, the 2 young leading people are walking across the street and they're chattering, and one of the things that they say is, oh, the Futtermans are going to come and visit, and they're much better now. That's how they blew that. A massive improvement. So I thought that's fun.
That is fun. So we have to wrap up, I think. I'm not quite sure what time we're supposed to go until. But if anyone here had any questions.
Oh, am I talking too much? Yes.
No, I don't know what time we're supposed to wrap up. Whether it's 12 or 12:30, I'm not sure. It's 12.
Well, I'll tell you when you're bored, just get up and go.
If you want to get lunch, just go get lunch.
Nobody's moving.
So, did anyone have any questions? I know, okay, back to there.
Thanks, Dale. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What do you remember about Charles B. Griffith? You know, A Little Shop of Horrors. You remember anything about Charles Griffith, the writer?
Charles B. Griffith, the writer.
He was a fabulous guy, Chuck Griffith. And he's the one who rewrote it over the weekend and played a bunch of parts in the movie. He even got eaten by the plant.
Yeah.
And was he also the plant's voice in
Yes.
the movie? Yeah. He just, he was so gifted. He wrote a lot of Roger's stuff. And I don't think he ever got the recognition that he deserved. And I wasn't in that part of the business who could tout people, but if I could, I would have, raised flags for Charles Griffith.
I think horror has always been kind of underestimated in show business. Like the horror genre itself doesn't quite get,
The horror
the
genre,
Oscars and the this and the that.
well, but even within the horror genre, there was a great man, Chuck Griffith, who, in person, he was just funny. And he would come to shows like this in the early days when we realized there was this odd bunch of people who loved him. Now it's normal. It's, I have to rephrase sometimes, but it is odd. But Little Shop is like a little thing into itself. It's not just a typical horror movie. It's like it's a joke. And Roger, in his courtliness, knew he was making a big joke, and it paid off.
So, I know you guys were talking about a film yesterday with Jackie, The Cheyenne Social Club.
Oh, that was.
yeah.
Oh, I love that movie.
That was a great movie.
And you were mentioning just how much you love show business and all these people. And in that film, you got to work with Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart.
Uh-huh. It was
And
great.
it was about a cowboy who thinks he inherited a hotel. And, because it was looked like a hotel, it was a building. And he comes across the plains with his partner, who is Henry Fonda, and to claim his inheritance. And it were a bunch of hookers. There was like 5 of us, and we each had our own ring. Like I was 5 rings, so that's how you had a gentleman caller. But we were very ladylike, and the director of the movie was Gene Kelly.
Oh, wow.
Oh wow, exactly. So I was saying that the only way I got to work every day is I had a fantasy in my head. I was imaging that I had a big coffee can and I'm driving, and I take all my awe and put it in the coffee can and shut it up. Then I would roll down my windows, it shows how long ago that was, and then throw the coffee can outside the window and roll it up, and then left my all and just couldn't go to work. There's a funny thing about the makeup that we got to do, all the ladies. We each had our own Westmore.
Wow. What, 5 brothers, so.
Yeah.
You know Westmore?
Yeah, they're big, famous in the
Famous makeup man, and his family, they're all brothers. And so, and I think they've hatched a lot of young ones.
Yeah.
But we each, and my Westmore, he gave me false eyelashes that were single lashes.
Oh,
Now
wow.
that is a very luxurious thing. Single bottom lashes also.
Wow.
And the way he kept them in order, I thought it was so novel, is he had a bagel, and he put each lash, when the day was over, he just put it on the bagel in order, and then the next morning he'd just take them off the bagel. So it's the only time I ever had a lash bagel. it was just a novel thing to happen. But and they put on big hair, and you felt so special, you know, especially with Gene Kelly. I remember he came once to Western Costume to see something they had made for me and give approval. And I had my kids with me, and he put the kids on his lap, and I kept thinking, you're a professional, you have to act professional. So I never once said, can I take a picture with you? And it dawned me, I thought it was an inappropriate thing for our relationship. Now I realize it was just a dumb thing. Because imagine having a picture with your kids with Gene Kelly and with Henry, but at least we have the movie. And so we're together, and except for Mr. Kelly. Oh, and a funny thing happened during that. For some reason, I mean, I'm not everybody's automatic confidant, but Gene Kelly came over to me and he said, you know, he's Jimmy Stewart. How do I direct him? How can I tell him what to do? He's, you know, oh my God. So he had his own little awe. And then a little while later, I'm doing the scene with Mr. Stewart. I couldn't not call him Mr. Stewart. And he said to me, you know, I'm not getting any direction. I'm not telling me what to do, you know. And I didn't want to be the go-between. He said, oh, he doesn't know what to say. So they both were in need of each other, but I thought it was so cute that they didn't know how to just say, hey, tell me what to do. You know, that Jimmy Stewart knew what to do. And he's the only one I can think of who, when it's time for your close-up, many lead actors, whoever you're working with, they go home or go to their dressing room or hang out. But Mr. Stewart always, and it was really hot while we were shooting, he always had his dresser come and put on his long coat and his hat, everything like he was in the scene, to be there for me. And that was really an elegant professional. So I want to share that with people to know how wonderful he was. And I made him laugh some too. And it was in the middle of our farewell scene when my bells finally rang, and then he went, oh, that's me. Well, the first time I did that, I was so happy that it struck him funny. And he just, you know, he broke the scene laughing. And in my head, what am I doing? I'm saying, I made Jimmy Stewart laugh. You know, it's your real self, your fan self, your actor self. It's a very layered little world we live in. And, you know, and it's a privilege to be here. And if you have any more questions, I don't want to make you lose your lunchtime. Or there's so many very interesting people that are here that I'm glad you shared this time with me. I appreciate it, as Andy would say.
So if anyone had any, we can take one last question if somebody had a question, or like Jackie said, if you're wanting to just come over to the table and she'll be happy to answer any questions for you.
Questions are welcome.
So did anyone else have a question that they wanted to ask? No, don't be shy.
I was just wondering, you worked in horror, you worked in all these different types of movies, comedy, horror. Do you watch any horror movies?
Did I watch comedy?
Do you watch horror movies?
Do you watch horror films?
Not on purpose.
That's fine.
I have to say, I married somebody who loves Dracula so much. And he's got a big Dracula painting. He's got one room that is his horror room with all these pictures on it. And so I am surrounded by horror man. And he did the worst thing that he thought was so funny. In his horror room, he actually ordered a puppet of Pinocchio,
Mm.
and he hung it by the neck from the
Oh.
ceiling. How sick is that? I thought it was an accident. I said, David, it looks like he's hanging. And he went, yeah. So there's my horror life.
Give it up for Jackie Joseph. So yeah, so come on by the table at any point and get a photo of Jackie or a photo with Jackie or my wonderful book.
He's my official husband.
La la la. Yeah, I'm the hustler for Jackie. She'd give it all away for free.
Oh, my goodness.
And our students, come on by.
It's for actors and others for animals.
Oh, that's true. All of the money, yeah. All of the money that Jackie makes actually goes to actors and other. Well, why don't you tell everyone about that real quick? Actors and other
Oh,
animals.
well, Actors and Others is something we started on the Doris Day set,
Oh,
and it's still going. I'm still on the board of directors, and Doris, when she moved to Carmel, started her foundation, but her foundation still does a little support for Actors and Others when we ask, and basically that was Doris's heart. The four-leggers, as she called them. But, and I was with Doris a little before she died too, which was another story.
So come on over and say hi to Jackie, guys.